Hey everybody, welcome to another brand new episode of CPOV Autographs. I have a cold. If you can't tell, then maybe I'm better at my job than I thought. But either way, we're going to get through this intro as quickly as possible so I can get you on to this week's episode really quick. First, I want to shout out the incredible network that this show now lives on, certainpov.com. We also have an awesome Discord server that you can get to from that same website, certainpov.com. There's a permanent invite link there on the homepage. Come join us. We recently reorganized the Discord, so it's more easy to engage in conversation. We have organized it by topic instead of by show, so you can chat about TV, movies, video games, comic books, and much, much more. You can even recommend guests for our shows. We're always looking for new folks to chat with on each and every show that features guests, so feel free to do that whenever you like. But enough about our Discord server, which again, you can find at certainpov.com. And let's go on to this week's episode. I am chatting with the incredible Alden Peters, former producer for Shut Up Evan, whose shoes I filled when I stepped in season 2. He is also an incredible filmmaker, writer, producer, just a genuinely awesome human. And we had such a great chat about his upcoming movie, The Robosexual, which is now on Kickstarter. We also chatted about his love of sci-fi, our mutual love of video games, and much, much more. So without further ado, here is my conversation with the handsome, charming, and delightful Alden Peters. So we'll get started. I'm really excited to be chatting with you. My guest today is the incredible Alden Peters, the producer to end all producers, the very large shoes I had to fill in for Shut Up Evan.
They're only a size 10.
They're only a size 10. Oh, I actually have bigger feet, so that explains a lot. But I'm really excited to have you on, Alden. As of when we're recording, very recently, you were at the up top of a Shut Up Evan episode where we got to talk about your new film.
Yep.
And it was the first conversation we had really gotten to have besides through email. And I was really interested in the short film version of it and all of this stuff. And so I wanted to have you on the show within time to promote your Kickstarter, because this film that you're funding, The Robosexual, is actually on Kickstarter. So Why don't we start by you telling the listeners a little bit about The Robosexual?
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's interesting to hear you say stuff like, oh, I had big shoes to fill, yada, yada, yada. Such a great producer. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And then when Evan's like, I found somebody, and I was like, oh, thank God. This is like somebody who knows how to actually do a podcast. This is going to be great. And Shut Up Evan has been excellent since you got started.
Stop it.
But yeah, The Robosexual is a queer sci-fi short film. It's inspired by queer history, specifically the treatment of homosexuals in the 1950s and 60s, right? Where, we were forced into an underground essentially with like code words to identify each other and fear of being arrested for talking to the wrong person in a bar. And so I had been doing a bunch of research and writing of like pre-Stonewall gay rights activism. I am a huge sci-fi nerd. And then I had been trying to write queer sci-fi for a while, and it just never clicked, I think, because I tried to just make characters gay. And it didn't like, it just...
Wait, you can't just do that? Characters can't just be gay?
I thought I could just change it, But it didn't really work until I had like the thought, what if I, from the ground up, from the world building, from the very beginning of a kernel of an idea, base the whole thing on the queer experience. And that's when things really started to click. So
that's amazing.
Thank you. So I was working with this producer named Benno Rosenwald, who I worked with on my last film, Femme. And I developed the script with him for a while, and we had this plan ready to go. And then the pandemic got really bad. And so our compromise was just to shoot one scene from the movie. And it turned out well. We submitted it to film festivals as its own little short film, proof of concept. It was supposed to be B-roll for a Kickstarter, basically, was all we were shooting. But we were like, hey, this kind of stands on its own. Let's just send it out and see what happens. So that was a lot of fun because that was like a fun little mini film festival circuit that was unexpected. But now our Kickstarter campaign is launched. We're doing it for real. We're going in to make this full film. It is a short also, but it's a like 15 to 17 minute short, 15 to 20, depending on how some of the pacing turns out, versus the like 6 minute little break-off proof of concept. And today, as of recording this, we are coming to the end of the second day of the campaign, and we are 31% funded, which
That's
is
amazing.
not too bad after 2 days to be a third of the way done. And so, yeah, I'm feeling good. Yesterday, I'm not going to lie, I thought I was going to throw up. I felt like crying at some points.
Yeah.
Because I sent these emails out at like 7 a.m. and like, 7:30 rolls around and I was like, nobody's donated yet on a Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. This is a disaster. But I'm feeling hopeful now, which is good.
That's great. I'm hoping that I can direct some of my listeners to support this as well. It is no secret that I am a queer individual and that queerness is a big part of this podcast. It would have to be if I'm anywhere in relation to Shut Up Evan and gay shit and pop culture. I have to admit that I get such a thrill whenever, like, folks ask me about all my podcasts, but when they ask me about Shut Up Evan, I get to give the one-liner, the gay shit and pop culture line, and it's just such a good line. Like, I'm almost mad I didn't think of something like that, like a one-liner for my other shows. Like, it's just really good.
It's so good. And Evan came up with that and was like, and it stuck. And I was like, that's good. Just say that every time because it was perfect.
But yeah, I mean, I want to know a little bit more about what went into making the Robosexual. And I guess let's start with, since you haven't really filmed a lot of it yet, you've just filmed the proof of concept. Like, that scene is done really well. I mean, the acting is phenomenal and the setting is phenomenal. But I want to talk about first the skyline scene. So it opens with this great, like, Blade Runner-esque skyline, which I'm sure is not by accident, this kind of future, neo-future. Is that all computer graphics?
100%.
Is that really? Yeah. Like, it looks really tight. I think what's really impressive is then you also show an alleyway, which is clearly an actual alley with some special effects, right? Or is that all green screen?
So the opening shot, the wide, like the exterior, that's 100% 3D. And then we filmed our exteriors on Roosevelt Island. There's all of this beautiful brutalist architecture there, and it looks like you're not in the city. So we filmed a bunch there. So like her walking, they have these kind of like glass covered walkway areas. So her walking through there. And then are you talking about the big shot where it kind of like jibs down? So that was a real stairwell in a parking garage on Roosevelt Island. But originally I was going to just replace the floor because it's like she looks down and there's just a cement floor below her. So I was like, I'll just take out the floor and then just like look like there's a couple more levels. And it wasn't working. And so the solution there was to basically just the areas where she walks is cut out and then everything else has been replaced. So I kind of rebuilt some of the actual architecture with 3D software so I could extend it a bit and then also bring in a fake 3D camera to kind of adjust the camera move and then move into another fully 3D like kind of stairwell column that the camera glides down.
That's unbelievable. And like, so it's clear to me you're not just the writer, you're not just the director, you're also cinematographer, you're also special effects. Now I assume obviously the Kickstarter is to bring in people to help you with some of this stuff, but like, that's pretty astonishing to me. I don't know a lot of other filmmakers who do everything. I mean, I guess as a director, you've got to kind of have some sense of the other parts, right? But this is really impressive that you're like the guy.
It's true. We did have a cinematographer though, Shirley Chan. She is iconic. She was a documentary cinematographer that I've worked with. We worked together at HuffPost. We both did brief stints at Mike, though different times. She was one of the infamous ones that got hired and then laid off in the same week that company. If the listeners don't know, Mike is the company, MIC, where Evan Ross Katz and I used to work. It's the company that will not be named. The stories out of that company alone. Anyways. So Shirley's a documentary DP. Because of COVID, we could only have a very small crew because we didn't have enough money to safely have a large crew because the sacrifice there is time. And time is money. It's true what they say, but like we didn't have enough time to get everything done we needed to do with a full crew. So I reached out to Shirley because I figured I'm going to need a documentary person, someone who can be a one-person department, somebody who can work on the fly and just kind of roll with not having what we need, which is usual of documentary stuff. But she did a crazy job. We were leaving the end of the day, wrapped shooting at Roosevelt Island, which was the day after the other stuff we shot. And in the car, she was like, I've never shot a narrative before. And I was like, what? She's like, oh, I didn't tell you that. This is my first narrative I've ever shot. And you would never know. The fact that, first of all, the cinematography is gorgeous, but the fact that this was Shirley's first narrative shoot is like, it blows my mind how talented she is. So anyways.
Yeah, I mean, that is really... It's apparent that there is skill touching this, but like I want to talk about the two main actresses in this scene first. Oh,
but first, I'll say what you're talking about, like doing everything, because it comes from having a documentary background. Because a documentary shoots, especially documentaries in general, it's like you have to wear every hat. There's you think there's no money in like independent filmmaking. There's less money, negative money in documentary filmmaking, and very often you have to be the producer, the director, the cinematographer, the gaffer, the sound person, and transportation. I don't know, and like try to like get somebody to be comfortable on camera, and the ability to kind of wing it and go with the flow is something that I learned from there. And I think I've also been a very impatient person. So instead of waiting for someone else to do something, I would learn it myself. So I think that's why I do so many different things, because it's like, I'll just learn how to do this really quickly and then do it instead. And that's kind of, I think that's sort of why all of those things I do so much. But when I started making movies when I was like 15, I was learning After Effects so I could do visual effects. They've always been sort of hand in hand. Right. So it's like, I basically wanted to make cool things. And so I would have to shoot things so that I can get all the plates I needed for the visual effects. But to shoot things, I'd have to write a script so I would have something to shoot. So I kind of just like all worked backwards from just wanting to make cool stuff. And this is just the like, now I'm in my 30s and know what I'm doing version of that.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with The Good Place, but towards the end of the show, there's a moment where William Jackson Harper's character, Chidi, who's been anxious through the whole run of the show, interrupts everybody because they're trying to formulate a plan and goes, "Shut up, everyone, I'm confident now." And like, I get that energy from you. And like, I also... producing a show for an incredible person who I've yet to meet in person with Shut Up Evan, like also made me feel that way. Like I've been producing for a while and I've been recording and podcasting for a while, but like I feel a kindred spirit in your passion, because I always wanted to be some kind of VJ or DJ, right? Like I heard DJs on the radio growing up. And I'm like, I can talk about music for a while. And like, literally, it was like, well, if I want to talk about music, I need to first learn how to record it and then edit it. And then I need to learn how to launch a podcast and how to host it and how a website works. And like, it all blends together. And like, recently I applied for a gig that I may or may not get, where someone asked me to list my qualifications as a podcast producer. And like, I'd never actually written them out before. And when I wrote them all out, I was like, oh God.
You're like, am I bragging?
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that goes to your point about like directing and sort of knowing. I agree with that 100%, that I think it's like, if you're going to have to manage other people doing stuff, you should know what goes into that job. And being able to know like what it takes to do the visual effects so that it can be shot this way on set. And we need to like, just being able to keep track of everything. It requires I think a pretty intimate knowledge of each of those things. Even if I'm not the best at some of those steps, I at least know how to pull off those steps so that I can oversee the whole process.
For sure. And I think that goes across the arts. Like, I have friends who are songwriters who have told me, like, I write music and I play guitar great, but I'm a piss poor piano player, but piano is better for making broader structure for a song and that kind of thing. And like, you know, I think it's definitely true across many places. Going back to the film, I love the two lead actresses in this scene.
They're so good.
They are so good, and the young woman who's playing the robot in the scene, the android.
Yeah, her name is Shakendra Fennell.
Shakendra is so captivating. Like I don't want to even spoil the short film. I feel like people should watch it. Like, I don't even really want to talk too much about the narrative.
No, we can do that because here's the thing. I think by the time they're listening to this, and by the time the Robosexual is done, either who knows? I don't know. It's either going to just be like, we're going to post it and it'll be online and whatever, or we're going to kind of like cannibalize it and bring it back into the full Robosexual thing.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that I believe this character from the moment she looks at me. She is so captivating and has, I don't even know how to describe it, like this deep, intense look that you like fall into. Which is not something you can really teach someone. I feel like you can to a degree, but like there's a natural beauty to that. And like it reminds me of some of my favorite characters that I've loved in video games and TV and movies, where like they look at you and you're breathless almost. It's
like, did you play Detroit Becomes Human? Or Detroit Become Human?
My spouse did. I didn't play it, but I watched her play a lot of it.
Because there's a moment where there's the android in the menu, and at a certain point when you come back, the android's like, "Are you my friend?" And then she like does this thing where her like she looks like she's about to say something, and it'll go on for as long as you want to watch it, but you just like. She just like almost talks, but then doesn't. And you're kind of like leaning in. And I felt like Shakendra had that same type of quality to her where you're just sort of like, what are you going to say next?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's done so masterfully. And I think it's also because her scene partner, like as someone who is an anxious, nervous, guarded person sometimes.
The incredible Janine Hartman.
Janine is so good at playing this kind of nervousness that's familiar, right? Like anyone who suffered from anxiety or feels like they've been othered or that they're doing something that they know is okay in their heart, but others don't, which is, of course, a parallel to homosexuality and queerness in general. You know, we're taught growing up, at least folks our age, maybe not folks younger than us, that it's wrong and we should be embarrassed by it and we should talk about it. Like, that's conveyed so instantly in her performance also. I'm curious, what was besides just praising them and washing them with, just praise, what was the casting process like? How were the auditions?
Yeah.
Or did you just know at writing this film that these were the actresses you wanted?
Whew. Casting is something else. So no, I had some actresses in mind that I knew that I wanted to be in it, and it just ultimately didn't work out for many reasons. One, because it was these two roles, they're bigger now in the Robosexual than they were, because this scene that happens that you see was the first scene in the Robosexual, and it was like half a page. And then there is another short scene with Janine's character, Jane, and Spark, the android. She is in the film throughout, but she's the sidekick to like the main antagonist. And so they're both sort of like side characters, right? And so when we were first reaching out to people, it was for this full script, and like nobody wanted to be... The actresses that we were reaching out to like weren't so interested in that. And then I was like, okay, well, we're doing just this one scene and they're the lead in this scene. And then scheduling and other things didn't work out. It was just a disaster, of course. So what I did was post on casting networks, which, like Backstage is a handful of them where you can post a job and people can submit with a resume or reel or whatever. And I just got a ton of auditions from that. And for both Janine and Shakendra, right away, I was like, yes.
Them.
Yeah. That's it. And so we did do callbacks. We did see another person for the role of Jane. Shakendra had it when she auditioned. It was like she was the only one that did it. So we still did callbacks with notes and adjustments, which even if you know you want to hire them, you do want to know ahead of time how they can respond to a note. So we will do callbacks with adjustments, and the adjustments don't even need to be necessarily what I want. It's just, if I suggest something, how are you going to take that and use it? And then the other Jane character was much more like slapstick comedy kind of nervous. And it was interesting, but very different. And what I did was, because I had audition tapes, is I edited them together. So I took the self-tapes from each of them and cut them together, added music, and just sort of like created the whole vibe of what the scene would be. And with Janine and Shakendra, it was magical. It was perfect. And that's how that worked. And then it was also great because I changed a lot of the dialogue to fit sort of the things that they were really, really strong at too.
I love that. It's just so apparent from the minute you watch it. Like, also, like, I'm not unaccustomed to getting things from friends who are working on artistic projects. I'm in the indie work scene, and like, I want to support all of my friends who are working on anything, because anything I've learned over the last, I don't know, like 5 to 8 years is like, even if something starts out as it's not something you like, that doesn't mean there's nothing there, right? And if it doesn't hurt to help, I always try and help.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if someone's doing something offensive or abhorrent, that's a different story. But like, and so, you know, when Evan tells me that you're coming on, I'm really excited. He sends me this. He's like, oh, he has a short film. You should check it out. It's not very long. I was like, all right, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
You know, only knowing minimally your background, having no idea you were a sci-fi nerd, and thank God that you are. I thought I was the only nerd working with Evan Ross Katz. Turns out I'm not.
He has a type.
Good to know.
Me, you, and his boyfriend, all nerds.
Yeah. But then I watched this and I was just gobsmacked. I was just, because I'm
thank
also
you.
a giant sci-fi nerd. And like, I want to ask, before we talk more about the film specifically, where some of your inspirations come out. Like, obviously anyone who watches this will see Cyberpunk and Blade Runner and those kinds of things. But like, even in the Android performance, I see some data from Star Trek. I see some, like, you know, Decker in some of the way people are carrying themselves. Like, I see these sci-fi, not tropes, but like characteristics. And so I'm curious where your influences are pulling from for the Robosexual, besides just being gay as hell, because obviously.
Well, I think the thing about like Blade Runner is I think that is such a defining, I mean, that and what's his name? And William Gibson, it's like, those are like the two like yin and yang of like what cyberpunk is. So it's going to look like Blade Runner in some way, just because that's the genre. And I think other sort of inspirations came from data is one of them. Also Jude Law and AI, artificial intelligence.
Sure.
I know that I can pull up the lookbook because you kind of listed off some of the things in the lookbook. So yeah, we have AI, artificial intelligence. We have some Moonlight, Mr. Robot. Then there's a ton of like cinematography references. Those are some of the big ones. I think though, like some of the, especially for the production design, Cheyenne Ford, our production designer, she also loves sci-fi. And I found her by Googling production designer, New York City sci-fi. And she had the SEO on her website and had a little blurb how she wants to do sci-fi. And I know that she loved Blade Runner 2049. I think Ad Astra is another one of her like influences. But yeah, it's kind of like all of that stuff. And I think that like Mr. Robot is a key reference because of the cinematography specifically. A lot of like not having the lead room, having the person looking right at the edge of the frame. A lot of that we pulled from Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot, did I read this or did I watch like a video essay or something? But just talking about how Mr. Robot is cyberpunk, and it is just it doesn't look like Blade Runner, but if you actually look at the content, it is cyberpunk, and you certainly feel it in the tone of the show. And so yeah, those are some of the references. I think I also am like, I think The Matrix definitely was huge for me, especially in the wardrobe, but a lot of like the club party scenes, a lot of that like Berlin nightlife inspiration from The Matrix we brought in for sure, and a lot of the costuming. And then what else do I have here? I have some other like lighting references from Atomic Blonde.
Sure.
There
I can see that.
is some
Totally.
some Vertigo in there. I don't know if we quite pulled that off. And and also some like cinematography like Mr. Robot, but there's also this film called Soy Cuba, which is a Soviet era film. I know it was like Soviet, like the era of like Soviet and Cuban like alliance, but I don't know if it's actually a Soviet film. I want to say it is though. But a lot of that cinematography is very like wide angle lens, roaming camera kind of stuff that we pulled in for inspiration from a lot of Wong Kar-wai as well. Like Happy Together. What is his other big one? I forget. Anyways, the point is though that like a lot of these references, some of them are mine, a lot of them are Shirley, from Shirley the DP, from Cheyenne the production designer, and they all kind of like clashed together or mixed together into what we ended up with.
I love that. I mean, it's clear as a sci-fi fan who doesn't have an allegiance to a particular sci-fi and watches everything, I can see a lot of it in this. I mean, even I see some Doctor Who in here. I see some Star Wars, just in like little bits and pieces. I'm curious, growing up, were you always into sci-fi? And what was like the most pervasive sci-fi for you? Because for me, I would say that Star Wars was the most pervasive as a kid. And then when I became a young adult, I started looking more into Star Trek and more into like the more cerebral stuff. Not that Star Wars can't be cerebral, but I think they're they're achieving different things.
Not that it can't be, it just isn't.
Right. But also, like, I'm a huge fan of the Mass Effect trilogy. I have a Mass Effect podcast, and like...
Okay, good. I have actually had a note of thing. I want to bring up Mass Effect with you at some point.
Okay.
We'll circle back to Mass Effect.
We'll circle back to that. But like, that's one of the most pervasive sci-fi franchises to me because I spent so many hours with those characters. And so like the relationship side of this, as they're starting to flirt in part of the scene, I felt that just from the interactivity of those games. So like, I'm curious to wrap the question back around, like, what are some of your earliest sci-fi influences or just favorite sci-fi things that you grew up watching?
I mean, definitely Star Wars is pretty foundational for sure. I loved the movies, but more than that, like me and my younger brother had a ton of Star Wars toys. And so my younger brother and sister lived with my dad, who we would like visit on weekends. So when we were over for the weekend, we would have like all weekend long, just these massive battles with all of our Star Wars toys and just like make up our own stories and just like have like, you know, the original characters, the prequel, like they all were in this big war together. And I am a huge Star Wars fan. And when Star Wars is good, I think it's really, really good. And then I guess similar to you, I did watch Star Trek back then. Star Trek, I remember, was a lot of Next Generation and Voyager. And I remember it was something that my dad liked, so I would watch it. And
Same.
I wasn't like as into it as I became later in life. But I remember like one time my older brother was like, Alden, like, stop watching TV. And I was like, but it's sci-fi. It's good for me. I like didn't understand. I thought like sci-fi was like watching the Discovery Channel. It was like, no, it's okay if I'm watching TV if it's sci-fi.
Because I'm learning.
Yeah, exactly. And so those were huge. But I think my favorite sci-fi film of all time is The Matrix. And for so many reasons. I originally liked The Matrix, of course, because it was cool. It was just awesome kung fu fighting and the whole sci-fi element was awesome. That was my first kind of like in. But then it was mostly watching the special features part of the DVD, right?
Yeah.
And watching how they made the bullet time effect. It was this green screen studio, and the way that the camera moved so quickly was because each, film movement is 24 frames per second. It's just the video, like a film camera is just taking 24 quick pictures. So what they did is they set up actual still cameras in a semicircle. They all take a photo at the same time, but when you play them back frame by frame by frame, you have this moving camera while they're still. And I think like the visual effects supervisor was talking about this, and he was just nerding out about what they were doing, and I was fascinated. And that was the moment where it clicked, where like, wait a minute, this is somebody's job. Like his job is just to like do this. Holy shit, you can do that. And it's like the reason that I'm a filmmaker is because of that film. And then the third thing about The Matrix that has been so wonderful is how, as a work of art, it has grown either through the times or with me, or the lens through which we now look at the film because of the Wachowskis both transitioning, and looking at The Matrix as a queer allegory now, like gives me such like another layer toward of appreciation for the film, of like, oh, wait a minute, if you look at this as a queer awakening, then it's like, holy shit, this is the queerest sci-fi I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, like, I didn't know as a young bisexual how important both Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss would be to my sexuality. Like,
Carrie-Anne Moss as Trinity, oh man.
Like, and she's gone on to play so many characters. Like, she's even in Mass Effect, she plays a sort of like outlaw character in that. And like, it's funny. The Matrix, when it came out, I didn't even see in theaters. I wasn't that much of I was a casual sci-fi nerd. You know, I loved Star Wars. I loved these other things. But then when I watched it on DVD the first time, like you, like I felt like it broke my brain. Like I could see the Matrix code, as it were. Like it just changed me in a way, and I was like, oh, this is what movies can be. You know, it just, and also the soundtrack. Like, let's not forget, like that final scene with Rage Against the Machine playing as Neo takes off. Yeah. Like that changed how I interpreted music in movies, because then like from that, like some of my favorite movie soundtracks are like Scott Pilgrim versus the World and Birds of Prey, which came out recently. Like these movies that make the music integral to the moments. And like I feel like The Matrix was the first time to really do that in a modern way, that just like you couldn't have that scene without that song, right? Like Wake Up is just as important to that final scene of The Matrix as Neo and the special effects and everything else. So I share your adoration of The Matrix. Even the whole trilogy, like there were bumps along the way. It's not a perfect trilogy. I still enjoy all of those movies. I think it's a good trilogy.
There's elements of both of the sequels that are crazy. That car scene alone is like, you know what, you just take it with whatever grain of salt you need to for that car chase scene. That's incredible. They built a highway for that. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, well, that's like even like the video game, when they released the video game, which of Path of Neo, which of course I played, like,
and Enter the Matrix also.
Yeah, and Enter the Matrix. But in Path of Neo, there's a moment where the Wachowskis as pixel characters show up on screen and go, hey, so video games are supposed to have boss battles. There's no boss battle in the movie. So we changed the ending so you could have a big boss battle. And you fight this like giant Agent Smith made up of Agent Smiths.
I vaguely recall that. I remember loving Enter the Matrix. I remember liking Path of Neo because you get Neo's powers, but it's a very different type of game, and it was like very surreal sometimes. So I vaguely recall that as the finale.
And it's just such a bonkers way to end a game, like to break the fourth wall as the creators and say, hey, we changed this because you deserve something cool. Like, but I never also, back then when I first saw The Matrix, I had no idea how integral the Wachowskis would be to my just nerd life. From Speed Racer to even Jupiter Ascending. Like I always say, Jupiter Ascending is one of those movies that I love because I don't love it. Like I love it for its problems. And like when you find out about the production afterwards and how they cut half the movie out because the studio wanted it to be shorter, it's like, oh, they were onto something with this original movie and then the studio just hacked it up. But like, I feel like I didn't know what queer icons they were going to be. Of course, none of us knew really. And now I feel like they are a staple to science fiction as a whole.
For sure. And like, and infusing queerness into all of their work. It's like, you know, it's like one thing that I want to do is like see more queer sci-fi, but like they're the trailblazers that did this. Yeah. And they did it in a time when it wasn't okay to be explicit. Yeah, I agree.
It's really wonderful. And like I can see that DNA in the Robosexual for sure. I'm curious with the setting, and like especially for the scene that we've seen already with the bar scene, it seemed really important in the setup and the lighting to make it feel a little other, right? It doesn't feel like a familiar space. Yet, if you're a fan of sci-fi, you understand and comprehend that space. Obviously, you're in a physical location, but tell me a little bit about the colors and like the design of that space, how you kind of came to that look for it.
Well, what we ended up with was very bisexual lighting, and
which I'm okay with.
So we went so back and forth because, I feel like so much, especially a lot of like the cyberpunk artwork that I see on like Instagram or Reddit or whatever, like like a lot of bisexual lighting, right? A lot of blues, a lot of magentas. And so, but we were originally going to do something different. We were going to do like red and cyan or something like that. And as we were kind of putting this all together, I don't know, I just like went back to like, well, if I'm going to make this film, like it should look like the thing that I am drawn toward. Like that color palette, love it or hate it, like it catches my attention. And so like last minute, I was like, can we buy all new gels and change it to this color palette? But in so doing, we also had a lot of like practical like LED strips that are glowing within the scene. And so we tried to quickly order some replacements to those, but then I like got the wrong length. And so we ended up with this mixture of like red and magenta near the booths with this kind of like cobalt blue near the bar. And it ended up kind of like blurring together into this purple color, which I loved. Where was I going with this thought? I guess. Ultimately, though, I do think that like I do like that it's like bisexual lighting, but it's not like, like a two-tone of like this side of your face is this color, this side is that color. They blend into a purple, and there's like this purple hue to everything, which I really love. And if you go back to like the lookbook that I created, like that is the color of the background and the color of the whole vibe. So if I made a revised lookbook for something, I forgot why, but I replaced all of the reference stills we had with stills from our film, and it was seamless. And I was like, oh shit, if you actually like if you translated this PDF into what you see on screen, it was exactly this. And so that was a huge part of it. I think that like we were looking for locations, and we're looking for this sort of like bar area where they can talk at a bar. And then when we were looking around, we went to this space called Hollow in, I think, Ridgewood. I don't know if it's on the Ridgewood side of Bushwick border out there off Halsey on the L. It's like a music venue. And originally I saw some photos and it didn't look that promising, but we went there and we're like, wait a minute, this doesn't work as a bar at all, but it could be like a really awesome like cruising space. Just like pillars, basement vibes, fill it with smoke and some light. This could be good. And we were kind of like weighing our options of locations. This one costs this much. This other space is really cheap. And so we started getting really into this cruising idea. And we ended up with this bar, Bossa Nova, and in Bushwick. And they have this dance floor and this fog machine that they were like, use it, here's how. And we were originally going to do this whole sequence of her walking through this kind of like club in the fog where it's just flashing lights, figures cruising, really pulling inspiration from, a lot of like the nightlife scenes in The Matrix, which I came to appreciate much later in life when I was like, now I get it. I understand where you are. I was like, wow, it's so weird. Everybody's dressed like the Matrix in those places. And I was like, no. The Matrix is dressed like those places. But because of time, we just sort of like, a lot of the people looking at her was all pickup shoots that we had to do later in our apartment. Because they're just like, if it's a super close up of somebody,
you can't tell.
But it's intended to feel a little bit like people are watching. They're cruising. They're also like a little like, who's this woman and like, why is she here? And so it's motivating her discomfort of like, and being very explicit that like, she does not belong in this space. And then once they're in the bar, it starts to feel, I think, like a little more cozy and comfortable. Or once they're at the booth, I mean.
Well, yeah. I mean, it definitely as someone who's worked in nightlife and worked burlesque shows, like there was definitely a nightlife vibe to this scene. Like I felt like I could almost smell the room watching that scene because I've been in those kinds of places.
Oh,
right?
good. Poppers and fog juice.
Poppers and fog juice, yeah, and bad drinks
and BO
and BO. Oh, BO. Definitely not a thing I missed during the pandemic is the BO of random strangers. I want to talk a little bit before we wrap up about what's next. So you're running the Kickstarter now. If you are listening to this, odds are there is either a link in the description for the Kickstarter, or if it's beyond the Kickstarter's date, a link to the film where you can find out more information. But what's the next step? So once the Kickstarter's done and you've reached your goal, do you have a timeline for shooting? Do you have an idea of when you'd like to release? Like, how do you see this project playing out over the next few years, especially as the pandemic starts to, hopefully, knock on wood, wind down a little bit?
So first, yes, go donate, please. Even if we are like, let's say best case scenario, we're like way exceeded our goal. Donate anyway.
Yeah,
it
all helps.
The little secret, maybe I shouldn't say this, is like our goal for the campaign is lower than what we actually need to get it done, right? So we like set a goal that's a little bit lower than like the far reach of what it's actually going to take. So even if we've reached our goal, please keep donating. But our plan is to shoot in this summer, whether it's early summer, like right away as soon as we have our funds, let's hit the ground and start doing pre-production, or if it's August, September, is still TBD. That's going to depend on a couple of casting announcements that we're going to have. Well, I guess by the time you're listening to this, we probably will have made. But we, at the time of recording this, are still, we're juggling a lot of potentials at the moment. And so depending on a lot of like schedules lining up and things like that, I'm not sure exactly when the shoot is going to be, but it will be this summer and sooner than later. And then the post, if that 6-minute version was any indication of how long the post is going to be, it could take a while. Not going to lie. Yeah. It could be quite a bit. There is the amount of like visual effects and stuff that for things you don't even notice, like the bar that we shot in, every shot almost I had to replace some sort of wall because there were mirrors on both sides of the bar, and there were some walls we weren't supposed to see, but we just ended up having to see them. And so like almost every shot there was something going on there that I had to cover up. But yeah, I think that it should be hopefully wrapped up by, we might be doing post through the winter now that I think about it, and maybe into the new year will probably be when it's done. I think that the other factor going into this is that there's this other opportunity has come about since making the proof of concept version where I got to pitch a project, and that's still kind of a question mark. And if things go well in that avenue, they're also looking to shoot in the summer. And then there's this other project that also might be shooting in the summer. So there might be like, in a perfect world, it'll be the chaos of having too much to do in the summer. But I think that the Robosexual is probably the one that I have the most leeway with fitting it in where the other ones don't align, which is such a fun problem to have. This is like the dream of being like, oh my gosh, too many shoots.
Yeah, right. Too much stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'll often complain, like as someone who produces 8 podcasts and hosts 4, I will sometimes complain about how busy. I produce 8 shows. Yeah.
Wow.
And sometimes
is it your full-time job?
I still have a full-time job to boot.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So the progression of your reaction, the last part, that's most people's reaction. But that said, while I'm juggling all this stuff, and thankfully, knock on wood, I'm ahead on a lot of projects. I'm ahead on editing for a lot of projects. I'll complain, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have time for anything. And then I'll think about it, but I'm doing the thing I love all the time. Ideally, hopefully someday I'll get to do it full time, and that's the goal, and I'm working on that. But
and sometimes I feel like when you the more you have to do, the more efficient you become just out of necessity, and then the more you just end up doing in general, and it just sort of escalates until it's how the hell am I somehow juggling all of these things.
For sure. Before we wrap up the show and you do your final plug for the Kickstarter, you wanted me to circle back to Mass Effect. You had some questions.
Oh, yeah. So I know that this like re-release came out. So I never played Mass Effect. I played Halo, Halos 1 through 3. Multiplayer gaming, I never did. I love the story. I'm here for the story. And so I played like Halo, Tomb Raider, the Elder Scrolls games, Detroit Become Human, Jedi Fallen Order recently. That one I loved. Spider-Man I never finished, but I did really like it. And then I was like, Mass Effect. This is the game that's like this seems like the game for me, but they didn't have it for the PS4. And I was like, well, that's stupid. And so we got Mass Effect Andromeda. My boyfriend is a much bigger gamer than I am. I am here. I'm there for the story. I enjoy the interactive story, the kind of like D&D of it all, of like being able to influence like that kind of stuff. So this re-release I am so excited for, because I was like, this is the trilogy that everybody's like, this is the game. Andromeda is And Andromeda did feel a little like when playing it. Though it wasn't as glitchy as I remember when it first came out. And then we got Cyberpunk, and then I was like,
oh yeah, that one's a mistake.
Let's set that one down. And then we went back to Andromeda, and we're like, oh my God, this game is great. This is beautiful. Everything's working properly. But anyways, I just wanted to say that it was released at the worst possible time for me. And all I want to do right now is just like sit and play Mass Effect. But I can't. But I know I've seen you tweet about it. I've seen a bunch of people tweeting about it. And I just want to hear from somebody who knows the game very intimately, like, what do I have to look forward to?
Sure.
And, or like, is there, especially given, I'm assuming they updated some like gameplay mechanics aspects of it, maybe, given like, I don't know. Just tell me what I have to look forward to. Make me more envious that I'm not playing. So
first of all, I have to pitch. I am in the ending stretch of the third season on the third game of Mass Effect. I have a podcast called Reignite, where we replayed the Mass Effect trilogy as if we were the lead character Shepard and discussing the decisions we made. I go on a journey of queerness, discovering one of the characters who I was not attracted to on my initial playthrough that I was this time around, because there is relationships in these games. They're not as queer as they could be. They drop the ball a lot, but they are still, by the third game, somewhat queer. So it's called Reignite. You should listen to it, because I think it would pair well with your play of the Legendary Edition. But so the Legendary Edition is not a remake, it's a remaster. What that means is that the music has been improved and the graphics have been overhauled. So it looks a lot better. Mass Effect for me supplanted Star Wars as the greatest sci-fi story ever told.
Whoa.
And it's not even a perfect story. It has its flaws. We've discussed that in my other podcast, but it's the first time I created a character to be me that I felt like was me, and I could make decisions like I would make decisions to some degree. If you loved Elder Scrolls, this gives you more intricacies in places. It is combat-wise, mechanic-wise, it hasn't aged perfectly great. It's tighter now than the original version, but I think you're the kind of person you're saying you want to play it on easy and enjoy the story version.
Yeah. I'm not even ashamed of that anymore.
Oh, you shouldn't be.
Nope. Scroll over to story mode.
Yeah. Accessibility is important, and anyone who wants to gatekeep that can go to hell. But I think you'll really enjoy it based on what we've discussed today. It's just one of the most engaging franchises I've ever played. Some of the best voice acting and acting I've ever seen. The lead characters performed, because you can do male or female. Mark Meir and Jennifer Hale are two of the best voice actors in the business, and they do an incredible job evolving these characters over 3 games. It's the only game series where you directly import your previous character to the next game, and the decisions you've made in the previous games affect 2 and 3. So decisions you make in 1 affect 2 and 3, and decisions you make in 2 affect 3. And
I love that.
And it's cascading in a way that not a lot of other games do.
Yeah,
it's a mechanical
That's
marvel.
crazy. That's crazy to do that between 3 different games.
Yeah, they knew from the beginning when they released the first game that it was going to be a trilogy. They didn't know what the story was necessarily, but they knew there would be interlocking parts. mechanically the game has its issues, but I think the kind of sci-fi fan you are, you will love this story and you will love these characters. They are just played so well, and the relationships you develop over games. The first game's relationship development is not great, but the second and third game, especially the third game, allow you to explore queerness more. There are bisexual and queer and gay options. This is before non-binary was as pervasive in the culture, and asexuality was as pervasive in the culture. So that doesn't really have much. You could not be in a relationship. You could decide not to pursue a relationship with any of the characters, but you have to be male or female. There is no in between in this game, which is a bit of a bummer. But beyond that, I think flaws aside, it's still one of the best sci-fi stories ever told. And I think if you can find the time to play it, you absolutely should, because based on what you've told me, you will connect to this story, especially if you create a male shepherd to be you and based on your preferences.
Ugh. I'm hooked. The way that Detroit Become Human had like all your decisions affected it, and like you play as three characters, and like whatever you did in one storyline affected. That was just like, for me, I was like, this is it. This is the greatest gaming experience I've ever had. Like, this was so much fun. So the fact that they pulled that off over 3 games is crazy.
Yeah. It is.
You know what this feels like, though? It's like I watched Legend of Korra before I saw Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Interesting.
Because Legend of Korra was on Amazon Prime like 5-7 years ago, whereas Last Airbender wasn't. And I watched it and liked it. And then only recently, when it was on Netflix, did I watch The Last Airbender from the beginning to end for the full time, and was like,
now you understand.
This is why. I have a feeling that like it's the similar thing with like Andromeda, and like, okay, I get it, it's fine. And then from what it sounds like, everybody who's played the original trilogy of Mass Effect, it's like, I'm gonna play that one and be like, oh.
Yeah, I think so too. I have not played Andromeda yet, and now that that's become known, once we wrap up season 3, season 4 of Reignite is going to be us playing Andromeda, and my co-host has banned me from playing it until I played for the game to gauge my natural reaction to this game that was more or less panned when it came out, to see if I'll actually enjoy the experience naturally with that, in a vacuum without the previous criticism. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely play it. My questions for you that you'll answer later is who you romance and which characters you like, because that's all I care about, because they're all my babies. But I'm curious.
I did, when I played Andromeda, I tried to romance everyone and just like romance, like just to see what would happen.
Right, sure, of course. No, it makes sense. I tried that in Dragon Age Inquisition. Apparently, once you lock in a relationship there, it's just like, no, you're with this one person. Fine, no polyamory, I guess. Well, Alden, this has been a delight. Besides being your Mass Effect advisor, I've had a blast talking about this movie, The Robosexual, that's being kickstarted now. Before I have you sign us off and wrap up the show, can you please tell folks where they can find you on the internet and where they can find The Robosexual on the internet?
Yeah, onlyfans.com
/ Alden Peters. Send me nudes.
No, at Alden Peters, ALDEN Peters, everywhere. And Twitter, Instagram, for sure. Donate to the Kickstarter, please. And then follow along for the next project, which I will be doing. I don't know when this is going to launch. I forgot to mention this on Shut Up Evan, but I've been documenting the whole process of making this entire film.
Oh, nice.
In like production diaries, all of the Zoom meetings we've had, behind the scenes stuff. And I'm putting together a whole like YouTube series that's kind of like part production diary, part sort of like masterclass, part tutorial. That was inspired by Shut Up Evan, because I was like, I just like talking shop.
Yeah.
And I love like just talking about making things. So that's going to be, if it's not launched now, just because I haven't had time to edit all that stuff, follow along, because that stuff will be on the horizon as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This is great. I've always like wanted to be interviewed on a podcast.
Happy to do it. And I have other podcasts that I will happily have you on at a later date. But so I will include in the show notes a link to the Kickstarter for The Robosexual. But if you go to Kickstarter and search The Robosexual, it does come up pretty easily. But now I'm going to have you. I should also say, of course, it's been a pleasure to have you. I'm glad to know you. I'm looking forward to being friends with you in the real world post-pandemic. if I should be so forward, and to experience.
I mean, as of tomorrow, technically in the city.
Yeah, that's true. We're allowed.
We're all free.
But that said, I am excited for the Robosexual. I can't wait to see it and share it with the world once it's done.
Oh, it also it has a twist ending, which is something
who doesn't love a twist?
It's something I haven't said aloud, but we're excited for the twist ending.
Cool.
Just throwing that out if you like.
All right, I'm into it. But to wrap up the show, we have a saying on this podcast. It was born out of my now on hiatus forever music podcast. And the phrase is, music is life and life is good. It's this idea that as long as you're making stuff, no matter how bad life gets, it's still not that bad because you can be absorbed and enjoy your work. So if you could sign us off by saying music is life and life is good, we will wrap up the show.
All right. Music is life and life is good. Making movies is life and life is good.
I love that. Oh, an alternate take. I love it.
That's it for this episode of CPOV Autographs. Our theme music is by Michael Kill. Our logo was designed by Case Aiken and Joey Amons. If you liked the show, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way to help us reach more listeners. Questions, comments, or guest recommendations? Email mr.nat.storm@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at CPOV Autographs. Thank you so much for listening.
We've made difficult decisions.
And there are still more ahead of us.
2 people aren't enough to save the galaxy.
We need the toughest,
Smartest.
deadliest allies.
We need you.
We need you to join us.
And listen to Reignite.
A certain point of view podcast about storytelling.
Love.
And Mass Effect.
Join us every other Thursday as we fight for the fate of an entire galaxy.
You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts.
Or at certainpov.com/reignite.
We're counting on you.
We should go.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.